Hello. I'm Sally, your host. Welcome to my Masters Chess channel, the third board. In this video, I will show you the conclusion of the game played between the third world champion, Jose Raul Capablanca, and the English master, Frederick Yates, in 1919, Hastings. This video is part 3. If you have not watched part 2, or part 1, I recommend you watch them first. The link for part 2 will be shown above. If your device does not show the link, you can access part 2 and part 1, through links my master made available in this video description, and in the comments section. And now, without more delay, let's continue the game. As we watched in the last video, in this position, Jose Raul Capablanca had white and played Rook to c1. Since before this move, Capablanca was threatening to capture the black queen, and after black recaptures with the d6 pawn, he would target this pawn. But for reasons I do not know, he decided to delay the exchange of queens. He still has a clear advantage though, but Yates can make his path to victory more difficult if he makes the best move now. In the last video, I chose 2 candidate moves for black. They were Queen takes on e3, trading queens, and Bishop to d8, which loses another pawn, but tries to block the passed pawn. What should black play here? If you wish to study this position, pause the video now. In this position the best move for black is Queen takes on e3. One possible continuation is F takes on e3, Bishop to d8, a5, Rook to c7. To block the rook file pawn from a7, Rook to a1, Rook to a7, Rook to a4, Rook to h8, a6, Bishop to c7. And according to Stockfish, white would still be better, but his path to victory would be more difficult. Let's return to the game. In the actual game, Yates played Bishop to d8, trying to block the rook file passed pawn. This, however, loses a pawn. The game continues. Queen takes on c5, d takes on c5, knight takes on e5, king to e7, rook takes on c5, losing a second pawn, f5. Yates attacks the base of white's center. It is the best move in this position according to the wise fish. Another possible move for black was king to d6. But it would not be so strong as pawn to f5. One possible continuation is knight to d3. defending the rook, and threatening e5. This is the best continuation. White could also play knight takes on f7 check, which looks beautiful on the board, but it is better for black according to the engine. The game would have continued like this. King takes on c5. Knight takes on h6. King to d4. Knight to f7. Bishop to f6. h4. G takes on h4. f4. And rook to f8. Let's return to the original position. After knight to d3, the variation continues. f6. Rook to b5. Bishop to c7. Bishop to b7. Threatening the black rook, and preparing to move the white rook to c6. Rook to e8. Rook to c5. Bishop to b8. And pawn to e5 check. But white would still be better. Let's return to the game. After f5, white continues with rook to c4. Taking the f5 pawn would reduce white's advantage. A possible continuation is king to d6. Knight to d3. Rook to f6. Rook to c4. Rook takes on f5. Rook takes on b4. Rook to c7. Rook to b8. But white would still be better. Let's return to the game. After rook to c4, Yates plays bishop to a5, defending the b4 pawn and blocking the rook file pawn. However, according to Stockfish, it was better to take the e4 pawn, exchanging pawns. One possible continuation is rook takes on e4, threatening a discovered check. King to f6. Of course, king to d6 would lose in the spot because of knight to f7, forking the king and the rook. Knight to d7 check. King to g6. Rook takes on b4. Bishop to c7. Rook to e4. g4. Knight to c5. And bishop to d6. From now on, white's advantage is overwhelming, and I will abbreviate Stockfish's evaluations. Still, let's watch how Capablanca converts his advantage. After bishop to a5, the game continues. Bishop to b5. Opening the file for the rook. Rook takes on c4. Knight takes on c4. Taking the rook and threatening the bishop. This was white's best reply. Taking with the bishop would be an inferior move, and give black some air. The game could have continued like this. F takes on e4. Knight to c6 check. Rook takes on c6. D takes on c6. And bishop to b6. Let's return to the game. After knight takes on c4, black continues with bishop to c7, e5, threatening pawn to d6, bishop b8, knight to e3. Here, the best move for white was king to f1 according to the engine. One possible continuation is h4, king to e2, g4, king to d3, rook to h5, f4, G takes on f3 by Onpassen. G takes on f3. Bishop to a7. And knight to a5. Let's return to the game. After knight to e3, white is threatening the f5 pawn, which cannot be defended by advancing it, because of knight to f5, forking the king and the rook. Black continues with rook to h7. Knight takes on f5 check. King to f7. e6 check. King to f6. e7. Rook takes on e7. Knight takes on e7. King takes on e7. g3. According to Stockfish, it was better for white to play pawn to a5. Black continues with bishop to c7. Avoiding pawn to a5. King to g2. King to d6. Bishop to e8. Threatening the h5 pawn. Bishop to e2 was also good. If black exchanges pawns now, white would easily make another passed pawn on the king side, and have two passed pawns on opposite sides of the board. Black continues with h4. Bishop to f7. King to e5. King to h3. Threatening to win another pawn. Bishop to d8. King to g4. White is threatening. G takes on h4. And after black retakes the pawn. Pawn to f4 check. The game continues. H takes on g3. F takes on g3. King to f6. Bishop to e6. King to g6. d6. King to f6. Bishop to f5. Bishop to b6. d7. Bishop to d8. h4. G takes on h4. G takes on h4. Bishop to c7. h5. King to g7. Bishop to e4. And in this position, Frederick Yates resigned. Did you like this game? I hope you enjoyed this video. Please support our channel by liking and subscribing. It will help us a lot. My master and I wish you good luck in your chess. See you next time. Goodbye.